That reminds me of one possible screw up in this movie is when they're like, "Oh, the gas pump's stuck." He's like, "Step aside," and shoots the gas pump with a rifle. It's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
that could have gone bad."
yeah, I was watching that too, like because it was locked. Like
They don't let
gas
this
pump was
guy.
locked.
They don't let that guy at any gas station in the state. I don't know why.
Good evening to all of our listeners. Today we are reviewing the classic movie Night of the Living Dead. I've been looking forward to doing this one for quite some time. Before we jump into it, though, my name is Rob Coakley. I am your host, your curator of this horror movie segment that we do once in a while. Joining me, as always, is Dave Wilkins.
What's going on? I am the curator of the horror movie reviews.
Not on screen. I am on screen. I am the host, the curator, the Tales from the Crypt guy. You know,
You're the patsy.
I'm the host. Also joining us is Jesse Wilkins.
I'm the guy who talks third.
That's not true. Well, I guess like in the intro,
Yeah.
I'm the guy that barely actually talks on these things. But well, you'll see that in a few minutes. This is probably the last time you'll hear my voice for the next 15 to 20 minutes as Dave gives the synopsis. So let's get into that.
Night of the Living Dead, 1968, directed by George Romero. A disparate group of individuals takes refuge in an abandoned house when corpses begin to leave the graveyard in search of fresh human bodies to devour. The pragmatic Ben does his best to control the situation, but when the reanimated bodies surround the house, the other survivors begin to panic. As any semblance of order within the group begins to dissipate, the zombies start to find ways inside, and one by one, the living humans become the prey of the deceased ones. So fun fact about this movie real quick. I just called them zombies in the synopsis. The word zombie is not mentioned one time in this movie. And the word zombie is not used in a zombie movie until 10 years later with the sequel, Dawn of the Dead. This movie, they called them ghouls. So this movie was a pretty big deal when it came out. And it really kind of set the pace for horror moving forward. It changed the entire game. It was basically a manifesto for modern horror as we know it. And when it came out, right now it has a PG-13 rating, but when it first came out, it actually had an X rating. And people had not seen anything like it. If you watch this movie now, you hadn't seen it before, it's black and white. It's kind of got like a Twilight Zone feel to it. And it just looks like an episode of Twilight Zone. So you're not going to be like, you're probably not going to be scared watching it. But if you can imagine that society in the 1960s had not seen anything even remotely close to as graphic and violent and disturbing as this movie, you can imagine the outrage that surrounded it. And this movie wasn't just a horror movie. It was also a social commentary for a lot of the racism that was going around at the time, and also the Cold War. People were terrified of nuclear fallout and things like that. So you kind of got both those allegories in this little movie, which seems now so harmless.
Yeah, trivial, right?
Yeah.
Trivial if it were to come out today. To your point, a black lead in this movie who actually strikes a white woman at one point in 1968.
Yep.
Just unheard of at the time. Just absolutely take away the horror aspect of it and just put that in there. People were shocked and outraged just from that alone, which is, again, just so trivial today. Like it doesn't even resonate in a sense. So this movie is very important in history.
Yeah. Mainly for the reason that for the social reasons, sure. I mean, the Cold War ended up not being anything, but the social commentary is big. But mostly what I'm referring to is the way it changed the game for horror movies moving forward. We saw a huge push for zombie movies after this. It took a little while, 10 years for Dawn of the Dead to come out, but then it just really took off. Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead, all these just classic zombie movies that eventually led us to massive hits like The Walking Dead and things like that. So it was just huge, and it really paved the way for horror. And George Romero is a legend because of it.
Yeah, I mean, we had quote unquote zombie movies before Night of the Living Dead without the name zombie
Yeah, there
being
was
used.
one. It was the heck was the name of it? White Zombie from the
White zombie,
1930s.
right? And I don't think they say zombie in that movie at all either.
They
And
don't.
that's more of a like a they're not dead. I believe they're more hypnotized almost in that
Yeah, it's
movie.
a voodoo curse, I
A
think.
voodoo curse, yeah. So there were variations of of a quote unquote zombie without the name zombie, to your point. And like you said, they were called ghouls in this. And we don't even get the actual depiction that we think of with zombies in this movie either. There's some characteristics that are there for sure, but there are also some glaring differences from stuff that you would come to know as a zombie going forward as well. So
Yeah,
it
in
is an
that,
interesting
yeah,
movie.
they did the kind of zombie walk that obviously ate people and stuff. So you had the characteristics, and this whole not using the word zombie isn't exclusive to this. I mean, this goes on in a lot of movies. It feels like when you have a zombie movie and everybody knows it's a zombie movie, they either call them zombies or they don't.
Right.
You
Walking
don't
Dead,
get
for instance.
Walking Dead's a huge example. And it's kind of funny because a lot of these are modern day, like Walking Dead would be like a modern day depiction of a zombie outbreak.
Mhm.
So everything you obviously you have cars, you have guns, you have phones, you have all of the things that we have as a society, except apparently zombie movies. So in these movies or in these TV shows where you have everything that the modern person has, the only thing that didn't exist in their timeline was any kind of a zombie movie ever. Because if you've seen anything, the first thing you'd say when you see one of those isn't that's a walker.
Right.
No, you say that's a fucking zombie, dude. I've seen a ton of those movies, you know?
It's actually a pretty interesting observation.
Yeah.
It is a good point. They leave everything in except they stripped the zombies out of pop culture entirely.
Right. Yeah.
But it makes sense in this movie because there was nothing like this really before this, right? So not using the word zombie makes sense because it wasn't pop culture relevant
No,
in
it wasn't.
1968. So it's not like they were skirting around the word. It just
I
wasn't.
mean, the word existed. The word goes back to the early 1800s, but they, but to your point, they didn't use it in any pop culture at all that I know of.
Yeah,
But
and I enjoyed it because it's also not like what you get now, where zombies are depicted as extremely decayed, or they might be missing an arm or whatever. For the most part, these zombies, the makeup was very minimalistic, so you almost couldn't really tell which ones were zombies, which ones weren't. Whether or not they did a little bit more to the ones that have been zombies for longer, that you can interpret that yourself. But the first guy that walks up in that graveyard, you don't know if he's just a drunk guy. You don't know if it's just a regular guy. And then all of a sudden he's attacking people and stuff. So I thought it was really cool. It's just a different take. It's so cool to, see zombie movies just evolve over time. And then you go back and watch this one, and I've seen it before, but watching it again, like it holds up. It's just such a good movie. It's so much fun.
Yeah, the zombies are actually running a little bit in this movie. They are picking up objects. They are using thought somewhat in this movie. They're not completely brainless like we see in a lot of depictions. And I think that's an interesting aspect because of some of the stuff you just said, Jesse, where the makeup's like very minimal on the zombies, but that's because that works twofold. Obviously they didn't have the makeup effects that they had back then, but they didn't need them because this is the very onset of this outbreak. Like this is just starting. So there's no need for there to be crazy makeup effects, decaying or anything like that. We don't even know. Theoretically, we don't know what's going to happen with these people that have this disease or whatever that they're calling it.
radiation from Venus.
Radiation from Venus, right? Like they don't know what the actual outcome's going to be for them, if they're going to be quote unquote Walking Dead walkers, like zombies like we know them. So I think that's all great where we still see the thought process. They're picking up rocks, they're running, targeting. Like it's very different while still seeing the cultural impact that it had for movies going forward.
Yeah.
Right.
I also loved all the radio broadcasts that they were doing.
So good.
It was,
a brilliant way to work exposition into this movie, because you didn't, rather than just dumping it all at once, you had it kind of spread out a little bit throughout the movie with different radio broadcasts, different TV broadcasts, all the way throughout the movie. And that gives you the whole story rather than giving it to you all at once. And I think that's a much better way of doing it, because it keeps you on edge. They're like waiting for the right time stamp for them to broadcast the next update. And it kind of adds a little bit of tension to this, where they have already so many layers of tension between the characters and that are all trapped in the house. They had some really interesting actors, or some interesting characters. You had obviously you had the main character, Ben, and him riffing with Harry. That was, one guy wanted to lock down the basement, but Ben wanted to stay upstairs and kind of took charge. And you see a little bit of animosity growing between the two of them. And that obviously blossoms to something much more adversarial later on in the movie. And it was just really like edge of your seat, tense for the whole movie. And you can't see outside the house. So you don't know, like there's one point in the movie where they're like, we don't know if there's a million of those things out there. So what are we going to do? And then your first two like major deaths, I thought were so shocking. There was the young couple, their young, good-looking couple. You thought they were probably going to go to the end, and they just blow them up. And the most disturbing scene of the movie was the zombies going through that burning car and just picking their corpses apart and eating them. Which is like, dude, for something like that in the 1960s, must have been terrifying.
Yeah. To the point with the characters, I think this is like George Romero's strength from the movies that I've watched from George Romero, is creating characters that are reacting differently in crisis, and the tension he builds between all of them as the time progresses. He does it great in this movie. I think he does it great in Dawn of the Dead as well.
Mm-hmm.
Even the remake Dawn of the Dead, I can't wait to cover that one, because I think that's actually a phenomenal remake.
Yeah, I love that movie. That's with John Leguizamo, right?
No, that's Land of the Dead.
Sure?
Yeah,
that wasn't both.
You might be right.
I don't remember.
No, I think he was in Land of the Dead. I don't think he was in Dawn. Dawn of the Dead had Ving Rhames in it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the remake anyway. So I just think that's like one of his strengths, is creating these characters in these tumultuous situations, giving them all different reactions, but understanding that these are all reactions that people would actually have, right? You have Ben, who takes charge, and for better or worse, sometimes for worse, I think. I don't think he's a perfect hero by any means.
No, he got everyone killed.
Yeah, got everyone killed,
including himself.
Yeah, I think it was Mr. Harry, was Mr. Cooper, right?
Yep,
the one that wanted to hide in the basement, but it was also a coward.
Yep,
throughout the entire thing.
Major coward.
Yeah, Barbara, who just went delirious for the most of the movie, which you could see somebody doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some that were maintaining a positive attitude through it. Like, it's just so well done that you have all these different reactions to this horrific event that's happening around them. And I thought the characters were portrayed just so well.
Yeah, I thought Barbara was an interesting character. Written, I don't know if I love the way she was written, but I thought her performance was pretty good, and it was her breakout. It was her very first role in a film.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep. Judith O'Dea.
Thought she crushed it. I can't. There's no one in the movie that I can say I didn't like, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I thought it was really well cast and really well, just really well done. It was such a major impact on the industry.
Yeah.
Funny little budget too, 114,000.
I know.
I can't even begin to imagine what that translates to today, but I can't imagine it would, even with inflation, I don't think it would be that big of a budget.
It can't be.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, so it was a one location movie with very minimal cast. So
no, they had a lot of zombie. I mean, there were extras, I guess. I mean, I don't know how much you pay a zombie in 1968, but there was that. There was some practical effects. There was a lot of explosions, a lot of fire, a lot of people on fire.
Right. Well, I'm saying 168K inflated to today.
114K.
With 114K.
Just a little over $1 million is what it translates.
It's a small budget.
The tight cast and without a lot of like crazy special effects that you would have now. It obviously, a zombie movie now with $1 million budget is going to be a pile of shit.
Yeah.
But So they did a lot with a little, but again, really small cast, which goes to show how good the acting was in this movie, that you could pull it off with such a small cast. And it is funny because if you look on IMDb and you look at the actors that are in this movie, so you got your top 10 or whatever, and then everyone else just zombie, 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 zombie.
Yeah.
And then you have Washington Scientist.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
Mark Ritchie. Can't forget about Washington Scientist. So
I'm saying IMDb says Tony Todd was in this. The heck did he play?
I think he was in the remake. I think he was in the
Gotcha.
1990
1991. Yeah.
91.
Yeah. Bill
Yeah.
Moseley was in that too.
Yep. So I think that's what you're
Devil's
probably looking at.
Rejects. Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of some negatives for this movie, and just none really come off the top of my head.
I don't know what a negative from 1968 would even look like, to be honest with you.
Right.
I mean, I guess if it was like if it was a flaw in the writing or an obvious acting, even like it's hard to judge acting back then. I mean, Dwayne Jones crushed it. It was phenomenal. I think everyone was good at acting back then. It's just in this movie, but
it's just a different time for acting too.
yeah, it's just hard to
acting was so much different than like you can't compare it to acting today. It's so much different. I guess we talked about the scene earlier when he punches her. It seemed like he might have jumped to conclusions there, punching her like that. Probably, I'd never recommend hitting a woman, but it seemed like he just. I mean, you don't know. It's a zombie outbreak, but maybe have a little patience with her. She just found out her brother's probably dead. You know, give her a break. Don't punch her in the face.
I agree.
That's a writing thing, though. You know, so I don't know. Whatever.
But I want to talk about the ending, unless you had something else you wanted to talk
I
about.
would just say real quickly that I think my one negative, and I was just trying to figure out if it's based off of my current day knowledge of zombie movies, if I'm just like retroactively like slightly like about this, it's the fact that it's radiation from Venus that's causing it.
Yeah, it's kind of got like a 50s sci-fi feel to it, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine because this is the 60s.
I wish it was something else, but like it's such a nitpick, right? Like such a nitpick.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays you have the catalysts for a zombie outbreak are almost always the same.
Yeah.
I Am Legend was a great one, but I mean, this was like the first one, so
yeah, that's fine. It's
hard
fine. It's me being nitpicky. I don't love that aspect, but
it seems a little bit wonky. I agree with you, but I'm not going to fault it for that at all. So the ending of this movie was unexpected. I think it was kind of because horror always was really good with like, if you're going to end your horror movie or horror story, you got to end it with something fucked up at the end. And they really, really pulled it off with this one. So people have retroactively gone back and just said that this was the ending of this movie was social commentary on police violence against Black people, which it absolutely was not. It just happened this way, right? So the way George Romero wrote this was everyone in the building gets killed except for Ben. Ben locks himself in the basement and he just waits it out, and the police end up showing up, and the police are shooting the zombies that are in front of the house, and they see Ben through the window, and he's sitting there looking out the window, and what people are saying is like they absolutely knew that he wasn't a zombie. He wasn't behaving like a zombie. They visually could tell that he was not turned, and they shot him in the head anyways. And they say that was George A. Romero creating an allegory for police violence against Black people. And George A. Romero said, no, I didn't do that. And if he did, he would have owned it, because that's people make their movies into social commentaries all the time, but that absolutely wasn't it. So that was it was a truly
which he does. Sorry to interrupt you, but
you're good.
Which he does social commentary in his movies. I mean, he's very specific that Dawn of the Dead is about consumerism, like the original 1970s one is about that, and he'd let you know what his movies are about. So if he says it, I believe him more than people that are watching it.
Yeah. I think he's like, I don't want to misquote him either, but they said, was that your attention? He's like, no, but I like it. I think it was something along those lines. But yeah, the ending of this movie was shocking. I remember I've seen this several times, but if I can go back to the first time I saw it, I was like, well, did not see that coming.
I thought his character acted weird though at the end, Ben's character. I understand he's being careful, right? And trying to, because there was a shitload of zombies outside.
Right.
But he had to have heard shooting
He did.
Right. And he had to have heard people talking. My mind goes to, I would yell from the window that survivors in here, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And because he goes to the window with the gun. And we've seen that these aren't the zombies we know today. These zombies were picking up objects and using them. So if I'm from the outside and I see something with a gun and they're not yelling out, right? Like I say better safe than sorry. They know what these things are capable of. So if you're not alerting them to your presence, I totally understand. Like that shooting first, asking questions later is what's going to happen there.
Yeah. And I think that's the way the movie was intended to be.
Yeah.
That it was an accident and he was just wrong place, wrong time.
Just another bad decision by him, right? Like he's full of bad decisions throughout the movie. Some stuff he did I agree with, some stuff he did I didn't. I don't think going into the basement would have been the play either.
No, I agree.
Right away. I thought that should have been that was obviously should have been like a last resort type thing.
However, if they did, they all would have been fine. Right. Because he ended up going to the basement and the zombies didn't get in. And he waited out until the police got there. So if they had done that in the very beginning, all of them would have survived.
Fair. I mean, but you just, yeah. I mean, obviously that's what would have happened there. It's just
the way his character was written. He was a tragic hero. He was it's a classic. It's just a classic like Shakespearean type of main character.
I can't fault him for it, because if I'm in that situation and there's a zombie outbreak, I wouldn't want to go into a basement where there's one or maybe two ways to get out. Dude, I feel like that's just, you're getting yourself into a situation where you will be trapped. With these things moving as slowly as they're moving, I understand some of them are running. I would want, they're coming through the back door. All right, we're running out the front door right now. And we are sprinting for it right now because we can outrun these things. That would be my mindset. So I would probably try to do, first level of the house.
Yeah, I actually agree. When I was watching the movie at the time, I agreed. I was like, yeah, you stay upstairs for sure, and then you go into the basement if you have to. What I was saying was, in retrospect, if they did, it would have been the right play.
Yeah, the way things unfolded, absolutely.
Yeah. And even some of his other ideas were fine, like the truck thing, getting the gas. Just that complete accident of the fire starting and stuff. Like, what are we doing here? Like, that should have worked.
That reminds me of one possible screw up in this movie is when they're like, the gas pump's stuck. He's like, step aside, and shoots the gas pump with a rifle. I was like, that could have gone bad.
Yeah, I was watching that too, like because it was locked. Like,
they don't let this guy. They don't let that guy at any gas station in the state. I don't know why.
Yeah, probably not the play, but overall, I mean,
hang on, let me put my cigarette out in it first, and then I'm going to shoot it. Put out my campfire. I'm busy. Yeah.
Oh man, reminds me. I used to work landscaping when I was younger, and I used to work with this guy who was an idiot. And I'm sitting there watching him. He's got a chainsaw. He's trying to start the chainsaw, and then he's like, "Oh, maybe it's out of gas." So he's leaning over the chainsaw. He's opening the fuel thing on the chainsaw. He's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth with like a long finger of ash at the end, just like dangling above the open gas tank. I'm like, this guy. I'm gonna take a step back.
Oh, you didn't think to warn him?
I'm not gonna warn him. I just want to see where this goes, but I'm just gonna make sure I'm not close.
Continue to watch.
Yeah, that was my thinking. But Night of the Living Dead, absolute classic. What's your ratings?
I'm gonna give it a 4.8. 4.8. They're coming to get you, Barbara's out of 5.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
It's a 5. The cultural impact of this movie alone, and I can't really find any major flaws with the movie. You have to look at it through the lens of history. This came out in 1968 and paved the way for our movies like it and changed the whole game.
Yeah, I'm with you on a 5 on this one. It's hard not to. Just, I remember I had seen it a long time ago and then went back and watched it, and I was like just shocked at how brutal they decided to go with it at that time. It's just, I didn't see anything else like that at that time. So very cool, very important movie. And I enjoyed it start to finish.
Yep. I love when these movies, when these movie creators, they just go against the grain and they punch culture right in the mouth and say, well, here's what you're getting, be disturbed. And people always reject it at first, and then it ends up being historic.
Yep. And creating its own genre that's still relatively strong today. Maybe waned a little bit in the last few years, but zombies are kind of here to stay between movies and TV shows and video games. Like you basically can't turn hell. Marvel Comics does a Marvel zombie series, right? Like there are zombies in so many different aspects. So
Mhm.
those
If Night of the Living Dead was the reason that Call of Duty Zombies was created, then I respect the hell out of it.
Hell yeah. Easiest 5 of all time.
Yep.
So that was our scores for this movie. What are your scores? Are you up there with us between, basically perfect score, except I gave it a 4.8 because I'm very careful about the 5s that I give out on this show. But I mean, this one definitely deserves it. But we want to know what you got. Do you have it at a 5? Do you have it low? And if so, please tell us why you would have this with a low score. Let us know in the comments. Let us know in Discord. For myself, for Dave, for Jesse, this has been the Night of the Living Dead horror movie review. We'll catch you next time. Peace.